All right, ladies and gentlemen, wakey, wakey, eggs and bakey, doing a very, very early live stream. Um, normally I don't stream this early, but I thought I would give it a try. Picked a hell of a morning to do this too. Holy crap, bro. It is, we are getting to freezing temperatures. It's getting below freezing temperatures where I'm at. They're talking about freezing rain maybe later today. I've got the heater on in the background, so if you guys can hear that, I don't know if my mic is picking that up or not, but if it is, you guys can hear that. Deal with it, because I'm not freezing my ass off here. You can't see it, but I'm covered in blankets. Um, I've got like double layered pajamas on and everything. It's cold, which is, living in the South. The southern part of America, the United States. Uh, we get snow and stuff like that, of course, but for it to get like really, 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 really cold, it's unusual. So, uh, it is what it is. So yeah, I've got the heater on in the background. The mic's picking that up. I apologize, but I'm not freezing my ass off while we talk about today's topic, which is James Gunn and the new slate of DC films coming under the Zaslav Gunn Safran regime. Um, this announcement came out yesterday, and I considered doing this live stream yesterday, but coming off of the announcement, um, I had to take some time to process exactly what we were getting, what we were looking at here. And I have to say, my initial thought coming off of this announcement can be summed up with one word. And that one word is confusion. uh, Very confusing. I was expecting a bigger announcement. I was expecting this to be presented in a bigger way. Um, but we kind of just got this short 6-minute video, and that was pretty much it. And the way that certain things are described in this video, the way that, you know, James Gunn presented this did leave me, and I think a lot of other people, very, very confused. So let's actually go ahead and watch the video, and then we'll dive in talking about. I'll be pausing throughout this video to kind of give my thoughts, but you guys will see what I mean. There's some stuff in this video, some wording that I think is, honest to God, very confusing. So let's just go ahead and dive into this.
Hey, everybody, I'm James Gunn. I'm the co-CEO of DC Studios. So as many of you know, DC has been disconnected in film and television for a long time. And it's one of, our jobs, mine and Peter's, is to come in and make sure the DCU is connected in film, television, gaming, and animation. That the characters are consistent, played by the same actors, and it works within one story. And if something is outside of that, like Matt Reeves' Batman or Todd Phillips' Joker or Teen Titans Go, that it is clearly labeled as DC Elseworlds outside of the mainstream DCU continuity. Now, Peter and I have gotten pretty lucky in terms of the 4 projects that are coming out over the.
All right, so let's pause right there. Everything he just said, I'm in total agreement with. I love it. Everything he just said, I think he's spot on. We had heard these rumors for a while that they were going to have like the main DCU, but then on top of the main DCU, they were also going to have Elseworld stories. And I think that makes a lot of sense because, there's, excuse me, there's a lot of people that really enjoy stuff like the Joker film and are looking forward to its sequel. There's a lot of people that enjoyed Matt Reeves' Batman and are looking forward to its sequel. And I think actually it's supposed to be a trilogy, if I'm not mistaken. But obviously these projects, even though they're successful, they were greenlit. They came out before James Gunn and Peter Safran took over, basically as the co-Kevin Feige's of the DC film universe. And Of course, they have their own vision, they have their own plans, they have their own story in mind for what they want to do. Um, and so Matt Reeves is the Batman. The Joker films may not fit into that vision. Um, so it makes sense that, okay, we can proceed with these projects going forward, but we're going to do them under the title of Elseworlds. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with the comic books, um, for those of you that are just familiar with DC through, uh, like the television stuff or the movies or maybe the video games, you're not really familiar with it as far as the comic books, because there's a lot of people like that. Elseworlds is a term from the comic books, and Elseworlds basically fall into the category of stories that are not tied to the main continuity or really tied to any particular continuity, but they're just kind of there. They're just kind of their own thing. They're in their own little pocket dimension. An example of this would be like the Dark Knight comic books, um, where you have like an older Batman, and he's like fighting against not fighting against the government, but like the government's cracking down on superheroes. Superman's kind of working for the government. Batman's doing his own thing. It's a much older Bruce Wayne. Um, they made two movies based off of it, and animated movies based off of it, I should say. And that's an Elseworld story. That's its own thing. It's not really tied into any particular continuity. It's just kind of a what if scenario. So that's Elseworld. That's what that is. So, for example, I've talked about in the past that I think one of the ideas for an Elseworld story that they ought to do is they ought to do an Elseworld story about Batman Beyond. It doesn't have to tie into the main DCU. You could even tie it into the Tim Burton canon if you wanted to. If you wanted to bring back Michael Keaton as an older Bruce Wayne in a Batman Beyond story, that could be its own separate thing. You could watch it without having to worry about any of the canon of the DCU. It would be its own separate thing. I think they ought to do that. I think that would be a great Elseworld story. But that's the excuse me. That's the category in which Matt Reeves is the Batman and the Joker is going to fall into. So that makes a lot of sense. It allows people to have those stories that are really successful, that I personally like. And, we don't have to worry about it conflicting with what James Gunn is doing in his own universe. So I like that. And then he talks about the interconnectedness of everything. I like that as well. I think that's a smart idea. Um, I do know that in, later articles and stuff, apparently there was a press conference that no one knew about until later, like articles. It's weird. Like, this is a very confusing situation. There's like articles referencing other articles that are referencing a news conference that was done a couple of days ago about this, like the night before this video is posted. And I haven't seen any like direct sources and stuff, but apparently, he said this isn't going to be like an MCU 2.0. It's going to be its own thing, but it is going to be an interconnected universe. It's not called Phase 1, it's called Chapter 1. The title of it is Gods and Monsters. And, it seems like he does really want to focus on having this interconnectedness. He does really want to focus on this being its own thing, but I think he's also trying to keep it away from not copying the MCU, which I think is smart because you want this thing to have like its own spirit, its own style, its own flavor. You don't want it to just be a knockoff of the MCU because that's what they tried to do with the Snyderverse. And, as we saw, it didn't turn out too well. So I like everything that he said so far, but it gets a little bit more confusing as we go on. So let's continue with the video.
Continuity. Now, Peter and I have gotten pretty lucky in terms of the 4 projects that are coming out over the next year. First, we have Shazam, Fury of the Gods. Shazam has always been off kind of in his own part of the DCU, so he connects very well. That moves directly into The Flash, a fantastic movie that I really love that resets the entire DC universe. Then to move into Blue Beetle, a fantastic film about a kid who's a marvelous part of the DCU, and then into Aquaman 2, which leads directly into our next few projects, which I'm going to tell you about now. So, Peter and I.
Okay. So, this is where the confusion stems from. Part of the confusion where it stems from. So, Shazam 2, The Flash, Blue Beetle, Aquaman 2 are all connected to the Snyderverse. I don't know why Blue Beetle, why we're still going ahead with that. We don't have to have Blue Beetle come out now. I would save that movie. I would do some reshoots, and I would try and work it into James Gunn's new universe. I wouldn't go ahead with that movie releasing it. Try and put it out in phase 1 or chapter 1. I wouldn't. I don't know why we're going ahead with that. But talking about the Flash, talking about Shazam 2, talking about Aquaman 2, to me, a lot of people have been assuming, like, okay, so wait a minute, like, is Aquaman, like, is the Snyder Aquaman, is the Snyder Shazam, is the Snyder Flash, is the Snyder Blue Beetle, is that all carrying over to James Gunn's universe? So is it not a reboot? Is it a soft reboot? Like, what's going on here? I was very confused about this to begin with, but here's my take on it. This is what I call the flushing period. Okay. This is where we take the last turds of the Snyderverse and we flush them down the toilet. These movies are already finished shooting. These movies are, if they're not finished, well, they should all be finished shooting at this point, I would assume, but they're nearing the end of production. Shazam and Flash are probably already finished as far as that goes. But at this point, to scrap them would be wasting money. So I think this is really just a financial situation where it's like, okay, let's put these movies out. Let's try and make some money and just get it done and over with. So to me, like, the next year going into 2024, it's cleaning out the slate. It's finishing up the Snyder stuff so that we can move on. I don't think that who's the actor that plays Shazam? I don't even know. I don't think that actor is going to be playing Shazam in James Gunn's universe. I pray to God, I pray to God. If there is a good and merciful God in the universe, and I believe there is, for the love of God, do not let Ezra Miller come back as the Flash in James Gunn's universe. Oh my goodness. And we'll actually talk about that here in a little bit. Because James Gunn said some very interesting stuff in regards to Ezra Miller. But I don't think Ezra Miller is going to come back as the Flash. I don't think that Momoa is going to come back as Aquaman. There's rumors that he's going to come back as Lobo. I think that's far more likely. I don't know who's playing Blue Beetle, but see, that's why I kind of feel bad about the Blue Beetle film, because whoever's playing Blue Beetle, if that movie is connected to the Snyderverse, they're kind of getting the shaft. They're kind of drawing the short end of the stick. Like that really sucks. That really sucks for them. So I kind of think with Blue Beetle, since Blue Beetle hasn't been in the Snyderverse yet, just delay that movie. Do some reshoots, tie it into the new universe. That's what I would do. I would hold off on that movie, but whatever. So I think there's a separation here between the Snyderverse stuff that is coming out, pretty soon, versus like the James Gunn stuff that's actually going to be canon to his new universe. So let's continue with the video. We'll talk a little bit more about this.
I, along with a group of very talented writers, have started to map out an 8 to 10 year plan of what DC Studios will be in film, television, and gaming. This first chapter is called Gods and Monsters.
Okay. That's very interesting that he says, film, TV, and gaming. So he's wanting to interconnect everything right from the jump. With the MCU, it started out with just the films. And then later they introduced the Disney Plus shows, which I don't think have been all that successful, I'll be honest. But he's wanting to start out from the gate. He's wanting to start out right from the beginning, connecting everything, including video games, which I thought was very interesting. Kind of makes me wonder about the Wonder Woman video game that's supposed to be in development. Is that going to get reworked to where it can fit into this new universe? I don't know. We'll see. I don't think things like the Suicide Squad, I don't think that's going to be a part of this because that's part of the Arkhamverse. So I think that's kind of something that's Elseworlds at this point, to be honest. But we'll see. Let's continue.
Now, this, what I'm about to tell you, is a part of the first chapter. It's not the entire first chapter. The first project.
Okay. So he talked about the Snyder stuff that's still left to come out, Shazam 2, The Flash, Aquaman, Blue Beetle. And now he makes a distinction. So he kind of puts all that in one category, and then he makes a distinction. At this point, he says, all right, from this point forward, this stuff is going to be chapter 1. So it seems like everything from this point forward in the video is actually going to be part of the new DCU, part of the James Gunn canon. So there's a distinction here. There's flushing down the Snyderverse, what's left of it, versus James Gunn's new canon, his new universe, his reboot.
Is Creature Commandos. Creature Commandos is an animated series. I've written all the episodes. Something we're going to do that's a little bit different at DC is we're going to have characters move into animation, out of animation, usually having the same actor play their voice as who plays them in live action. The next project up is Waller. This is a story of Amanda Waller, played by Viola Davis. Viola Davis is going to team up with members of Team Peacemaker, and this is a story that's been created by Crystal Henry, who did Watchmen, and Jeremy Carver, who created the Doom Patrol. It is a fantastic story that's out of this world, and I can't wait for people to see it.
All right. So this is another point of confusion that I have with this whole thing. So we start off here. We have the Snyderverse. He brings that up first, kind of getting through all that, putting that to an end, closing that up. And then he says, all right, so now we're moving on to the chapter 1 stuff. We're moving on to my shit. We're moving on to my stuff, is essentially what he's saying. What was that animation he was talking about? Creature Commandos. Okay, so that feels like a James Gunn passion project. I don't know how important that's really going to be. I don't know who these characters are. I'll be honest with you. I don't know who these characters are. This is the first time hearing about them. But this seems like a James Gunn passion project. So Waller is like where I had a lot of confusion to begin with. It's going to be Viola Davis's Amanda Waller, which is confusing because the Viola Davis Amanda Waller is part of the Snyderverse. So, and Peacemaker, I didn't watch Peacemaker, but I'm pretty sure it's part of the Snyderverse, right? Okay. So he brings up the Waller thing with, after he talks about chapter 1, after he introduces chapter 1. So that makes me think, okay, is he saying that Viola Davis is Amanda Waller and Peacemaker are going to be a part of the new DCU? How can that be if we're doing a reboot? Like, you see where the confusion comes in. Like, he ought to be talking about the Waller stuff with the Snyderverse. Now, there has been rumors for a few months now. Like, I remember, like, back in the spring, there was rumors of an Amanda Waller HBO series that was in the works. So I don't know. I at this point I'm assuming the Waller series, because it's Viola Davis and tying that in with Peacemaker, I'm assuming that's going to be a part of the Snyder continuity, but it's not going to carry over to the James Gunn DCU. That's what I'm assuming. And I think James Gunn actually did come out later on and clarify that there's not going to be a Peacemaker season 2 because he's having to work on the new Superman movie. And I think Waller is supposed to be basically a de facto season 2 for Peacemaker. So I think it's going to wrap up that story pretty much. I don't think it's going to carry over to the James Gunn DCU, but we'll see. It's honestly a little bit confusing. The way some of this is worded does leave one to be a little bit confused. So let's move on.
Viola Davis is going to team up with members of Team Peacemaker. And this is a story that's been created by Crystal Henry, who did Watchmen, and Jeremy Carver, who created the Doom Patrol. It is a fantastic story that's out of this world, and I can't wait for people.
Yeah, you can tell like this is, I guarantee you, like part of James Gunn coming on to do this is that, yeah, he'll do the reboot, but he probably wanted to have something to wrap up Peacemaker, because Peacemaker is a James Gunn story, if I'm not mistaken. So this is probably just to give a conclusion to that plot, if I had to guess. Okay.
People to see it. Okay. Next up is the big one, the true beginning of the DCU.
All right. So again, like the wording of this is confusing. So he said, okay, so we're going to have chapter 1. Like he already brought out chapter 1, like right before he talked about Creature Commandos. And now he's saying, okay, but this is going to be the true beginning of the DCU. This is going to be the true beginning of my canon, of my shit. Okay. So is Creature Commandos not a part of the DCU? Waller, I'm assuming, is not a part of the DCU. The way this is worded is confusing, but the way I'm taking it is that this what he's about to say here, which is the Superman movie, this is going to be the start of the DCU. All right. That's like the dividing point between the old shit and the new shit. The shit that doesn't matter, the shit that's going away, the shit that's getting flushed down the toilet, and the shit that actually counts. So it seems like the shit that actually is going to count going forward starts with the Superman movie. All right, so let's continue.
This is called Superman Legacy. This is being written by me. I'm in the middle of it. I'm having a great time doing it. And Superman will be released into theaters July 11th, 2025.
Now that's interesting. So Superman Legacy right now is the only movie, the only project in the DCU that actually has a confirmed release date. It's actually confirmed to release on July 11, 2025, which 2025 is what I expected. You know, that I've been speculating for some time now that I think this reboot's going to get started in 2025. I think that gives them enough time to do everything they need to do. Because, you know, guys, you need to realize when a movie is created, like, you know, there's like a whole 2 to 3 years before a movie comes out, where there's production, there's work being done on the film. You know, it's a long process. So to get to this reboot, to get to the first film in this reboot, there has to be a 2-year gap. There has to be a 2-year period to where they can work on it. So Superman Legacy is going to be the start, at least from what I understand. And again, the wording here is very confusing, but to me, it seems like Superman Legacy is going to be the dividing point. Like this is going to be the start of a whole new story, a whole new continuity, a whole new universe, and everything else that was mentioned in this video before Superman Legacy is its own thing that's coming out before.
2025. Okay, the next thing is a big premiere HBO television series called Lanterns. This is a story of a couple of Green Lanterns, John Stewart and Hal Jordan, and we have a few other lanterns peppered in there, but this is really a terrestrial-based TV show, which is almost like True Detective, with a couple of Green Lanterns who are space cops watching over Precinct Earth.
Okay. love the idea for this. I love this as a concept. I love this as an idea. Having Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart and essentially what is like, given James Gunn's style, I'm assuming it's going to be kind of like a buddy cop movie. But why are we focusing on Earth? Like, why don't we do this in space? Like, I would love to see a buddy cop movie between Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, but have it set in space. Like, let's do it there. Now, yes, I know that, the Green Lantern of Earth, obviously their jurisdiction, their quadrant, um, their sector, I should say, where they, do their duties is obviously Earth. Um, so maybe, he clearly has a, let's continue with the video because he clearly has a plan for this. It's going to tie into the larger story.
They discover a terrifying mystery that ties into our larger story of the DCU. Next is
Okay. So apparently, like, this is going to be important for the overall plot, the larger narrative, the larger story of the DCU. Essentially, their Infinity Saga, pretty much. Um, this is where we're going to start getting like the first clues, the first little nuggets of like, oh, there's this bigger thing going on. What's happening here? Like when the Infinity Stones started to be introduced in the MCU, that type of thing. Something's going on Earth that's going to tie into a larger story. Um, I don't know. I kind of like wanted to see a buddy cop movie in space, like when I first heard about this, but I think it'll be good. I think it'll be good. My problem with this, in all honesty, is that it's a series and not a movie. This should be a movie. I think this should be a movie. Um, the TV series, the uh stuff that's not on the big screen, I think ought to be there for enhancement. I think it should enhance the movies. I think it should be there for people that want to delve deeper into things, but I don't think they should be necessary. I'm a big fan. My philosophy when it comes to consuming media is that you shouldn't have to view one type of media to understand another type of media. So, like, for example, the Star Wars sequels are a good point about this. I don't know whether you knew this or not. I think everybody knows at this point, but when the movie first came out, Star Wars Episode 9, Palpatine, how did he survive the fall in Episode 6? Well, it turns out he transferred his spirit into a clone body. They don't explain that in the movie. They don't, expand on that. There's not a lot in there that would suggest that that's what happened. All Palpatine really says is, the dark side is a pathway to many abilities, some considered to be unnatural. And yeah, that random, rebellion soldier that says, the dark side, Sith alchemy, Sith science, blah, 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 blah. It's stupid. It's really stupid. If you want to understand how Palpatine comes back, you got to read the novel. I don't believe you should have to read the novel. I think the novel is there if you want to have a deeper understanding. I think it's there to enhance the film. I think it's there for people that are, see the movie and they're like, I kind of want to know more about that. Let me go pick up the novel. But it should not be a requirement. My problem with this Green Lantern series is that it seems to be a requirement because it's tying into the larger narrative of the DCU. I don't really like that. That's one of my problems with the MCU shows, is that I don't think you should have to watch these shows to understand the larger narrative. If you just want to see the movies, that ought to suffice because they started out as movies. That story started out in film. So it should be only the films you should have to see to understand the plot. You shouldn't have to watch the Disney Plus series. Same thing goes here with the DCU. You shouldn't have to watch these series. You should just have to watch the film. So if you're going to make the Green Lantern stuff important to the DCU, if it's not just going to be there for, depth, enhancement, if it's actually going to be crucial to understanding the plot, then this Green Lantern storyline should be a movie. It should be a film. So I'd really like for James Gunn to take this story because the premise sounds really, really interesting. The concept I really, really like. but I think he ought to take it and turn it into a movie. I don't think it should be a series. Also, the name Lanterns, that's a little bit pretentious. Let's just call it Green Lanterns and be done with it. All right. I don't think we need to. I don't think we need to exclude the green part of it. Like, let's just call it Green Lanterns. Okay. Uh, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the title. I wish they would just call it Green Lanterns. Like lanterns just sounds pretentious. But anyways, let's move on.
They discover a terrifying mystery that ties into our larger story of the DCU. Next is a big movie called The Authority. The Authority is a passion project of mine. It's based on the marvelous Wildstorm characters we are now bringing into the DCU and will interact with all of our primary DCU characters. The Authority are a group of superheroes who think the world is broken and they want to fix it by any means necessary. I think it's a very different look at superheroes. We're doing a television series called Paradise Lost. Heroes. We're doing a television series.
All right, so here we go. We have another James Gunn passion project. He even called it that himself. So this is something that James Gunn really wants to do. This is something that James Gunn really wants to focus on. I kind of remember this group. I don't think I ever read any of their comics, but I remember this from if you guys know who Linkara is from Atop the Fourth Wall, I remember some reviews about these guys. And if I'm not mistaken, like these guys are very edgy. They're very almost dictatorial in their approach to superheroing. This feels like a James Gunn thing. It really does. Like this feels like something like he specifically wanted to do. I mean, obviously he did. He called it a passion project. This isn't really my cup of tea. I'm going to be honest with you. This isn't really my cup of tea. I don't care for this type of team. I don't care for this type of, theme in comics. I don't know. Like this group doesn't really jive with me. I don't know. Like this just isn't my cup of tea. I'll be honest with you.
At superheroes, we're doing a television series called Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is the story of Paradise Island, usually known as Themyscira, which is the birthplace of Wonder Woman. It's almost like Game of Thrones with Westeros, but with all of the inhabitants of Paradise Island. The introduction of...
Okay. So I was confused about this to begin with. I was reading articles and stuff, listening to people, and the way they set it up, from what I was hearing, is that this was going to be a prequel series to the Gal Gadot Wonder Woman films. I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think this is a prequel series leading up to a new Wonder Woman, the Wonder Woman of the DCU. Not a bad idea for a TV series. Not a bad idea to explore, the Amazons, the warriors living on Themyscira, exploring that through a prequel before Diana is even born. That's not a bad idea because that doesn't really sound like it's something that's crucial to understanding the plot of the DCU. It doesn't really sound like it's something that's necessary, but it sounds like it's something that can enhance the story. Kind of like, and I'm going to bring up Star Wars again. If you look at the prequels, the Darth Plagueis novel, which is Legends, but I don't care about Disney canon, so fuck it. But if you look at the prequels, the Darth Plagueis novel is not necessary to understand the prequels, but it enhances the prequels. It goes into further depth about things that are brought up in the prequels. It's not necessary to understand the prequels, but if you read it, you're going to get more out of the prequels. That's what I think external media should be. So something like this, I think, would work as an enhancement to a Wonder Woman movie. The problem is, I think that they're doing this in the reverse order of what I would do. I would come out with a Wonder Woman movie first. I would come out with a Superman movie, a Batman movie, a Wonder Woman movie, and then after that Wonder Woman movie comes out, then I would come out with something like this to enhance the Wonder Woman movie. Not a necessity to understand the Wonder Woman movie, not a necessity to follow the DCU, but an enhancement to that. An enhancement to that movie and to the DCU. That's what I would do. I think that we need a Wonder Woman movie first. I'm not against this idea at all. I think this actually sounds like a cool concept for an HBO Max series, but I would come out with a Wonder Woman movie first. I think you ought to do Wonder Woman first and then do this as a prequel to enhance the movie. That's what I would do. All right. So let's move on.
Game of Thrones with Westeros, but with all of the inhabitants of Paradise Island. The introduction of the DCU's Batman is The Brave and the Bold. The Brave and the Bold is the story of Batman and his actual son, Damian Wayne. This is based on Grant Morrison's great comic book run. Damian Wayne is my favorite Robin. He's a little assassin who Batman tries to get in line. And so this is the story of the two of them and the beginning of sort of the Bat family in the DCU.
All right. First of all, Bat family in the DCU. You guys know, if you've watched any of my live streams about, DC, my thoughts on it, what I would like to see, what I would do if I was running the show. You guys know one of the things that I have wanted to see on screen in live action for a long time is the Bat family. If you want to distinguish this new Batman from all the Batmans that have come before in live action, let's do a proper Bat family. Yes, I know technically we got an iteration of the Bat family with Dick and Barbara. In Batman and Robin. I know technically that is the Bat family, but it wasn't a very good portrayal of the Bat family. So let's actually have a proper portrayal of the Bat family on screen. That's what I would do to distinguish, my idea for Batman in a live action film from all the previous iterations, because the Bat family has been out of the loop for so long. Wasn't in the Dark Knight trilogy. Robin was kind of in there at the end, but not really. We haven't seen it in the Snyderverse. So, there is a Robin in the Snyderverse, but he's dead. So I think the Bat family, I think that dynamic, that's something I've wanted to see on screen. We're going to talk about the new Batman movie. We're going to talk about the new Superman movie more in depth once we get through this video. Don't worry about that. So let's continue on.
Next up is a TV series called Booster Gold. Booster Gold is one of comics' really popular cult heroes. He is a fascinating guy. He's a loser from the future who uses future technology to come back to present day and become a superhero so that people will love him. It is basically the superhero story of imposter syndrome on an HBO Max series.
Okay. Booster Gold is a character that, I think they could do some really interesting stuff with. He's kind of a, he is kind of a fraud to a certain extent. But I think Booster Gold is a character they could do a lot of stuff with. I kind of would rather see this as a movie, to be honest with you. I don't know how important Booster Gold would be to the overall DCU story. So a TV series might work for Booster Gold as long as he's not too pivotal to the overall DCU story. But I also kind of feel like Booster Gold ought to be something that they save for phase 2. Phase 1, or actually, I need to get my terminology correct now because it's chapter 1. Chapter 1, I feel like should be focused more on the core Justice League members. So primarily we're talking about Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, and personally, I'd like to see Martian Manhunter. And hell, if you really want to go with the DC animated television universe, throw in Hawk Girl, But I feel like that it should focus on more of the core members of the Justice League, because I'm assuming this is leading up to a new Justice League. That's what I'm assuming. If nothing else, bare minimum, it should focus on the Trinity. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, bare minimum. and then you can expand on the other Justice League members from there. So I don't know. Booster Gold, I'm fine with that, but I feel like that's something they got to do in Chapter 2 instead of Chapter 1. I'd rather focus on the Justice League or at bare minimum the Trinity.
One of my favorite comic book series from last year was Tom King's run on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow.
Oh.
And so we're going to turn that into a big science fiction epic film. Now, Superman is a guy who was sent to Earth and raised by loving parents. Whereas Supergirl in this story, she is a character who was raised on a chunk of Krypton. She watched everybody around her perish in some terrible way. So she's a much more jaded character. And that brings.
Okay. This is my first huge red flag. Tom King? Tom King. Really? And apparently, from what I understand, Tom King is coming on as a writer or an advisor to James Gunn. I don't know who is feeding James Gunn his advice, but they need to be fired. Tom King is not a very good writer, okay? I saw I was watching a stream yesterday. I think it was Midnight's Edge. And there was a super chat that came in, and it was Paul Dini. They said should be a writer, and I'm like, yes, put on Paul. But Tom King, no, bro, absolutely not. Now, I haven't read this particular comic book, Woman of Tomorrow. I haven't read it, but I don't read a lot of modern comics because a lot of modern comics are absolute garbage. They're trash. Both DC and Marvel, they've not been very good. But, and I haven't read, as far as I understand, this particular story came out 2020, 2021, I think was the run for this. And, I've heard people say like, this is not good. Like, I've not read this particular story. I'm familiar with Tom King's writing though, and it's not good. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I think it really depends how much inspiration that James Gunn takes from this comic, I guess. Like, how much is it going to be an adaptation compared to just an inspiration? I've heard an interesting theory, which is, if this is the direction they go in with Supergirl and Superman, I think it actually worked pretty well. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more with Superman, but Superman, according to James Gunn, this version of Superman is going to be more hopeful, going to be more triumphant, going to be more, truth, justice in the American way. And I like the way that he put that: truth, justice in the American way, not truth, justice in a better world, like they try to do in the comic books, but truth, justice in the American way. The way that James Gunn has described this version of Superman, he's going to be very hopeful. He's going to be that beacon of hope, that symbol of hope. That's good. That's good. That's what I want from Superman. But he talks about Supergirl being more jaded. So I wonder if they're going to do a type of yin and yang type of thing with Clark and Supergirl, with Superman and Supergirl. I wonder if they're going to do a type of yin and yang type of thing where Superman is the light. He's jovial. He's hopeful. He's this symbol and beacon of all that's good and true. And Supergirl is more grounded and down to earth and more jaded and a little more darker, a little edgier. So they're kind of going to have that yin and yang dynamic to where Supergirl and Superman are going to work off of each other that way. That could be an interesting dynamic, and it could work. It could work. So I'm not totally jaded on the idea. I'm not totally taking the idea and just tossing it out the window and saying, no, this is garbage, this is trash. The idea, the potential here is good, but damn it, don't let Tom King near this thing. Dear God, please don't.
Watched everybody around her perish in some terrible way. So she's a much more jaded character. And that brings me to Swamp Thing, the last thing we're going to talk about, a very dark horror story in the origins of the monster who is Swamp Thing. And although it's totally outside of the rest of the DCU, it will still feed into the rest of the stories.
Okay, so Swamp Thing, very underrated character, somebody that I and a lot of other people have been wanting to see on the big screen for a while. This feels like it would be more in line to be a TV series more than Green Lantern. Like that's the thing. Like, so Swamp Thing's getting a movie, but Green Lantern is getting a TV series. Like that seems a little weird to me. I really think the Green Lantern, the premise is cool. I think it should be a movie though. But yeah, Swamp Thing, I think, is a very underrated character. I'm glad to see he's finally getting some love. It again, it doesn't seem like it's going to tie too much into the overall DCU, according to what James Gunn is saying here. But it's going to feed into it, so it's going to be, I guess, like in the background or something. They could bring in Poison Ivy with this too. They could bring in Poison Ivy to this whole thing too. So we'll see.
Anyway, those are the stories that I can tell you about right now. I've loved the DC character.
Okay, so this is not everything that's going to be announced for chapter 1. This is not everything that is going to be going down in chapter 1. Um he said so earlier in the video. He said that this is just a few of the announcements. So there's going to be more coming out. There's going to be more coming out later on. I think he's actually got a meeting with the board of directors at Warner Brothers with Zaslav. I think he's got a meeting with them next week, so we may get some more information next week. But this is just the beginning. This is just kind of the first wave of information. So, I was kind of underwhelmed with this announcement to begin with, but when I really paid attention to it, I'm like, oh, this is just the first announcement. This is just the first trickle of information. We're probably going to get more stuff in the coming weeks. And, as time goes on. And I think they're doing a Warner Brothers celebration, 100-year celebration later this year. We probably are going to get more information about that. So let's backtrack a little bit. We need to talk about the big two. All right, let's start off with Superman. Superman Legacy. Superman Legacy, I like the way that this is being described. I've looked at some articles. I've looked at some comments from James Gunn about this Superman. What his intentions are here, what kind of Superman this is going to be. As I've said before, this is going to be a more hopeful Superman, a more positive Superman. I look at the, I think this cover is from, I think this particular cover is actually from All-Star Superman, if I'm not mistaken, which is a good sign, which is a very good sign. But yeah, this is, I like this here. It's bright, it's hopeful, this is Superman. This is Superman, not dark and gritty. This is Superman. And the way James Gunn is describing him, hopeful, a beacon of goodness and truth, and that's Superman. So the way that this is being described is everything that I want to hear. It's everything that I want to hear about what we could get from Superman. So I like what I hear about this movie. I like what I hear about this movie. On top of that, he also we know this is going to be a younger Superman. This is going to be not an origin story necessarily. It's kind of going to be an origin story, but without being an origin story. From the way that this movie is talked about, from the way that this movie is described, I think Clark is already going to be Superman. I think he's already going to have the suit. I think he's going to already know about his Kryptonian heritage, but he's going to be struggling between his Kryptonian heritage and his human life. He's going to be struggling between, where he descends from and where he was raised. And so it's going to be Superman kind of, not really getting started as Superman, but kind of understanding what it means to balance those. I think it's going to be a character journey. I think it's going to be him coming to balance those two sides of himself. And that I think could be very interesting. That's kind of a good way to do an origin story without really doing an origin story. So it's not like, oh, here he is finding the Fortress of Solitude. Here he is getting the suit. Here he is discovering he's a Kryptonian. It's not really going to be that. It's going to be more so a character-driven film. And the character that's driving it is Superman himself, is Clark, is Kal-El. That I think is a good way to do an origin story without really doing an origin story. So I like that. I like that. Honest to God, the Superman movie is what has got me most excited. And that's a good thing because Superman is starting out this new continuity. He's starting out this new universe. That's a very good thing. That's a very good thing that I'm this excited about it. I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see a trailer. I can't wait to start getting casting announcements. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. All right. So let's move on. Last but not least, let's move on to the Batman film. Not the Batman, but the Brave and the Bold is what this film's going to be called. So, like I said earlier, um, the fact that this is going to be focusing on the Bat family, I really like because I think the Bat family is the direction you need to go. I've wanted to see them back on screen, on the big screen for a very long time. I've wanted to see that as a dynamic. If you want to differentiate this Bruce Wayne from all the Bruce Waynes that come before it, you bring in the Bat family and not just Dick and Barbara, but other members of the Bat family. And that's what they're doing here. However, I think James Gunn may be jumping the gun a little bit. I think this may be a little bit too far into Batman's career. Obviously, if we're going to be going with Damian Wayne, this is going to be an older Batman. Not an old Batman like Batman Beyond, but someone who's like, you know, 10, 15 years into his career. So I'm expecting this Batman to be 10, 15 years older than the Superman because we're supposed to be getting a young Superman and an older Bruce Wayne. So we must be pretty deep into Batman's career if we're going to be bringing in Damian Wayne as Robin. That's interesting. That's an interesting way to go. It's not the way that I would go necessarily. I've talked about this before. I forget which live stream I talked about this in, but you know, if I was going to do a Batman movie, I would bring in Robin, but it wouldn't be Damian Wayne. It would be Tim Drake. I would be doing the Tim Drake Robin. You guys know Tim Drake is my favorite Robin until they started to ruin him in the comic books lately. Seriously. But before they started to fuck up Tim Drake in the comic books, before that, before the recent bullshit with Tim Drake has been my favorite Robin. And I would bring in Tim Drake. Now, I understand Damian Wayne is Gunn's favorite Robin. That's understandable. But I think it's too early to bring in Damian Wayne. Now, if I was directing this universe, if I was in control of all this, I would bring in Damian eventually because I like Damian too. And that's something that's very interesting. I was watching some live streams. I was reading some articles. Apparently, people hate Damian Wayne. Holy shit. Like, people hate the fuck out of Damian Wayne. I had no idea. I had no idea the Damian Wayne hate was so strong. I knew there was like a group of people. I knew there was like a pretty loud portion of the fan base that didn't really care for Damian. You know, people call him a brat. People call him spoiled. You know, I know there's some Damian haters out there, but I did not know it was as widespread as it is. But people hate the fuck out of Damian Wayne. Like, damn, dude. Like, I like Damian. I think, you know, his character development, like him going from this spoiled, bratty assassin to, you know, becoming a Robin. Uh, that's an interesting character dynamic for me when you know, pair him up with Batman, when you pair him up with Bruce Wayne, and him being Bruce's, you know, biological son. It's fascinating. I also think the way that he works off of the other Robins is fascinating. So I like Damian. If I was doing this universe, I would bring in Damian at some point, but I wouldn't start out with Damian. I would start out with Tim. I would already have Dick Grayson as Nightwing. I would already have, you know, Barbara Gordon as Batgirl. Jason Todd obviously would be in there. I don't know if Jason Todd is going to actually be in these movies. Like, is he dead at this point? Or has he been resurrected? Do we have the Red Hood in this universe? Or are they going to do Red Hood later on? I don't know. I kind of think they ought to do Red Hood later on. Like, let's do this Damian Wayne Batman film first, and then like maybe in a sequel we do Red Hood. That's what I would do personally. I would do like a whole live action Red Hood movie at some point. I would not just have. I wouldn't just gloss over. I wouldn't skip over the Red Hood storyline. And say like, oh, it happened, but it happened in the past. We're not really going to show it. Like, Jason's here, but we're not going to show the Red Hood stuff. Like, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't gloss over it. But I would bring in Tim as the Robin. I would have him be the new Robin. I wouldn't bring in Damian yet. Damian, I would save for like chapter 3, chapter 4, or something like that. I would bring in Tim Drake. I think it's a little early to bring in Damian Wayne. That like this idea that James Gunn has for a Batman film sounds like what I would do for a Batman film, which is really focus on the Bat family, to focus on that dynamic. I really, really like that. I really like that, but I think he's getting too far ahead in the timeline. I think he's about I think he's about 4 or 5 years ahead of where I would start out with Batman. Um, I would start out with Tim Drake. I would have this be Tim Drake coming in as Robin. I would have this be a detective story because both Bruce and Tim are very detective minded. That's kind of their whole thing. You know, Tim Drake is the most detective like of the Robins. So I would focus more on that. Um I like everything I hear about this movie, except I would have it be Tim Drake and not Damian Wayne. I would save Damian Wayne for a later movie, for a later time period in the DCU. Going more into, again, like chapter 3, chapter 4, something like that. Um, I think it's just too early to bring in Damian. But that being said, I do like the Damian Wayne storylines. They came out with an animated film about Damian Wayne, years ago. I think it's one of the better DC animated movies. I really enjoyed it. So, it's not what I would do necessarily. I think it's jumping the gun a little bit. I think it's getting a little bit ahead of where I would take it, but um it could be good nonetheless. It could be good nonetheless. All right, and we'll see. We'll see. But I like the basic idea. I just think that you got the wrong Robin. I think it ought to be Tim instead of Damien. I think Damien ought to come in later on. All right. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. Final thoughts, overall thoughts on uh, this announcement. And remember, this is just the first part. Like, this is not everything. This is not everything that's coming down the line. Uh, this isn't even everything in chapter 1. This is just like the first wave of announcements. There's probably going to be other movies. I'm assuming there's going to be a Wonder Woman movie at some point that's going to get announced. Because I would think if you're starting out this new universe, bare minimum, we need to focus on the Trinity. If we're not going to include every core member of the Justice League, bare minimum, we need to focus on the Trinity. So I'm assuming there needs to be a Wonder there needs to be a there needs to be a Princess Diana. Shit. Okay. There needs to be a Diana fucking movie. There needs to be a Wonder Woman movie in chapter 1. There really does. This prequel series, nice, whatever, but you need a Wonder Woman movie. You got to have a Wonder Woman movie in chapter 1. Because when it comes to DC, the core of DC, yes, it's the Justice League, but the core of the Justice League is the freaking Trinity, bro. It's the Trinity. That's the core of the Justice League. So I'm hoping that we're going to get a Wonder Woman movie announced pretty soon. I hope. Green Lantern, again, I think should be a movie, not a TV series. My final thoughts on all of this is it has potential. It has potential. There's some things that I disagree with, but I'm not running the show. And I don't know what the larger plan is that James Gunn has in mind. For all I know, he's got all this planned out, all this mapped out. And when we see it on screen, it's going to make a lot of sense. But it has potential. It has potential. We're just going to have to see. We're just going to have to see. I think it's too early to judge. I do think this announcement was somewhat confusing. I've kind of had time to read into the details, to read into what's been said about this, and I think I understand what's going on. Maybe I could be wrong about some things, but I think I understand the plan here, and it definitely has potential. It definitely has potential. Next couple of years, we got to get through the Snyder stuff. We got to flush that down the toilet. That's going to be this year, going into next year. Flush that down the toilet. 2025 is really when the James Gunn stuff and the Peter Safran stuff is really going to get started. Some other stuff that was said in some articles, James Gunn said, hey, if something doesn't work, we're going to move on from that. So it seems like this is going to be a very adaptable universe. They're not going to stick to their guns. They're going to see what works, what doesn't work. If it doesn't work, they're going to drop it. If it does work, they're going to keep it going. And I think that's also part of like the Elseworlds thing. Like if something ends up flopping, if a project ends up flopping, they're just going to relegate it to Elseworlds, which makes sense. But I think this universe has potential. We need more information. We need to find out, some more stuff. But it is good to have some solid information, because all we've had for the last couple of months is just rumors. It's nice to have some solid information. I think there's potential here. We'll see where it goes. All right. That being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in to watch. Comment down below your thoughts on all of this. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where you agree with me. You know the drill. Of course, like, subscribe if you're on YouTube. Click the bell for notifications to keep up to date with all the DC content and more right here on Jesker James. That being said, also check out my other channels that are linked down in the description box below. Check me out on Rumble. I have channels over there as well. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, give me your thoughts down in the comment section below, and let's get the conversation going. All right. That being said, I am Jesker James with a Z, and I am signing out.